When we think about chronic pain, depression, and immune disorders, they seem like completely separate battles, right? They affect millions of people, but we usually put them in different boxes. Well, what if they're not separate at all? Today, we're going to dive into a fascinating medical puzzle that suggests these conditions are all tangled together in one deep biological web. So here's the big question that scientists have been wrestling with for years. Why does someone with, say, an autoimmune disease so often struggle with depression? Or why do so many people with fibromyalgia have to deal with both that widespread pain and profound mood changes? Doctors have seen this pattern forever, and now, finally, we're starting to get some really solid answers. All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we first need to get to know the three main players in what some researchers are calling this mysterious triad of conditions. On the face of it, they seem totally distinct. You've got fibromyalgia, which is mostly known for that chronic, all-over pain and just crushing fatigue. Then there's depression, a mood disorder, a disorder of the mind, though it definitely brings physical symptoms along for the ride. And finally, autoimmune diseases, think lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, where the body's immune system basically gets confused and starts attacking its own tissues. Three separate problems, right? Well, let's take a closer look. Now, the first huge clue in this whole mystery comes from a pretty radical shift in how scientists are starting to understand one of these conditions. And honestly, this one change really starts to unravel the whole thing. For decades, we thought of fibromyalgia as a central nervous system issue. The thinking was that the brain's pain signals were just stuck on high. The volume knob was broken. But now, a completely new and really compelling view is taking over. What if fibromyalgia is actually an autoimmune disorder? What if it's the immune system itself that's pulling the strings and causing the symptoms? And the proof for this new idea? It is seriously powerful. In a huge study back in 2021, researchers took antibodies, these are the foot soldiers of the immune system, from fibromyalgia patients and injected them into healthy mice. And the results were, wow. The mice almost immediately developed classic fibromyalgia symptoms, like being way more sensitive to pain and having a weaker grip. I mean, this was a direct causal link. It showed the immune system was absolutely involved. Okay, so if the immune system is a major player here, how does that connect all three of these things, the pain, the depression, and the autoimmunity? Well, the answer lies in a process that you can kind of think of as the brain literally being on fire. And this brings us to the key concept, the thing that ties it all together. Neuroinflammation. Now, this is not like when you sprain your ankle and it gets all swollen. We're talking about inflammation happening inside the protected space of your brain and spinal cord. And when the immune system kicks this off, it can mess with everything from your mood to how you even perceive pain. This right here is the common ground where all three of our conditions finally meet. Okay, I know this diagram looks a little complicated at first glance, but trust me, it's the key to this whole puzzle. Over on the left, you can see our triad, those three conditions we've been talking about. And notice how they all point to that one central problem in the middle, neuroinflammation. Now, let's shift over to the right side and see what biological machinery is actually causing all this. We're going to break it down piece by piece. So let's talk about this perfect storm. First up, you have these things called pro-inflammatory cytokines. The easiest way to think of them is as the body's emergency messengers. They're screaming, hey, we've got a problem here, and they put the entire system on high alert. Then the HPA axis, which is basically the body's stress command center, gets all thrown out of whack. And finally, all this chaos creates oxidative stress. This is an imbalance that damages our cells. You can almost think of it as biological rust. Put those three things together, and you get that fire in the brain. But here's the thing. This isn't just a simple cause and effect relationship. These forces don't just create inflammation, they actually feed off of it, creating this vicious cycle that can be incredibly hard to break out of. So let's look at our diagram again, because it's super important to understand this isn't a one-way street. These systems create a nasty feedback loop. Inflammation out in the body, maybe from an autoimmune condition or fibromyalgia, sends those cytokine messengers up to the brain. The brain then gets inflamed, right? And that neuroinflammation messes with the systems that control our stress and our mood, which in turn can signal the body to create, you guessed it, even more inflammation. It's a cycle that just keeps feeding itself. And listen, this isn't just some fringe theory we're talking about. The evidence is just overwhelming. In this big systematic review,
A staggering 85% of the studies they looked at found elevated levels of these inflammatory markers, those cytokines we mentioned, in patients with these conditions. That's a really consistent biological signature.
So, how do scientists even begin to make sense of all this complexity? Well, they use a framework with a really, really long name: psychoneuroendocrine immunology, or PNEI for short. I know, it's a total mouthful, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's the study of how our mind, our brain, our hormones, and our immune system aren't separate departments. Instead, they're one single, deeply integrated network where every part is constantly talking to every other part. And this integrated way of looking at things, it's way more than just a cool theory. It's fundamentally changing how we approach treatment. I mean, if all these conditions are connected by a common highway of inflammation, what does that actually mean for the people living with them?
And that's the real takeaway here. This is not just some interesting tidbit for a science journal. This is a potential roadmap for a completely new way to treat people. If inflammation is the common enemy, then maybe, just maybe, we can target that enemy directly and help with all three conditions at the same time. So this new approach is all about precision medicine. Step 1, identify a patient's unique biomarkers, the specific biological signs of their inflammation. Remember those cytokine emergency messengers? We can actually measure them in the blood and create a sort of personal inflammatory profile for each person. And then step 2 is to use that profile to pick a therapy that goes right after that specific type of inflammation. We're moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach and towards something truly personalized. So what do these kinds of treatments even look like? Well, some are drugs you may have heard of, like TNF-alpha inhibitors, which are already used for autoimmune diseases to block specific inflammatory signals. Others are compounds like NAC, which is an antioxidant, or even minocycline, an antibiotic that, it turns out, also has anti-inflammatory powers. They all work a bit differently, but they share one crucial goal: to dial down the immune system and put out that inflammatory fire.
All of this leaves us with one last really big question. We've just looked at this triad of pain, depression, and autoimmune disease through this new lens of inflammation. But what if this is the key to understanding a whole host of other chronic conditions too? Maybe taming the body's inflammatory response isn't just another treatment strategy. Maybe it's the future of medicine itself.